So today I'm going to be taking a look at the Samsung Galaxy M13, a phone that if you shop around you can pick it up for 99 quid brand new, but is it worth that 99 quid? Hopefully you're here to find out. So let's start by talking about the design of the Galaxy M13. Now for the display, it's a 6.6 inch effort with a full HD resolution and a standard 60Hz refresh rate. Now for 99 quid, having a phone with a 60Hz refresh rate, not a problem. But at this phone's very normal selling price of around 170 quid, and the fact that it has a 60Hz refresh rate, there are other phones on the market, namely the Motorola G32 at that same price with a 90Hz display. So for 99 quid, 60Hz display, not a problem, but for its normal price of around 170, it would have been nice to have at least a 90Hz display. But nevertheless, the display is really nice. Colours are really punchy and vibrant, and just overall looks really nice, like you would expect on any Samsung display. And then up in the top centre of the display, you get a dewdrop notch, which houses an 8 megapixel f2.2 selfie camera, which can shoot full HD video at 30 FPS. And selfie photos from the selfie camera are alright, they're about as what you'd expect from a budget selfie camera. A reasonable amount of detail, but low light is where it does struggle a lot and you'll lose a lot of detail and a lot of noise tends to creep in. And then at the bottom of the display, you get a standard chin, which is again what you find on most budget handsets. So overall, the front of the display is about on par with other budget phones on the market. On the right of the phone, you get your power button with integrated fingerprint sensor, which I found to be pretty responsive. There are a couple of instances where it didn't recognize my fingerprint and I had to try again, but for the most part, it works pretty well. And then above that, you've got your volume buttons. On the left of the phone, you've got your SIM tray, which of course houses your SIM card and then provisions for expandable storage via micro SD card. And then on the bottom, you've got your headphone jack, microphone, USB-C charging port, which can support 15-watt charging, and then a speaker grill. So of course, at this price, you're not going to expect stereo speakers, but the speaker is okay. It can sound a little bit tinny, but fine for a budget device. And then the top of the phone is completely clean, aside from a very small microphone hole at the top, so you don't get an IR blaster or anything like that. The phone is an all plastic build, which again, at this budget price point is what you come to expect, but it's kind of one of those textured back finishes, so it's not a matte finish to what you found on the Galaxy M23, but it's actually quite a nice material on the back. I've got the phone in orange copper, but it is also available in light blue and deep green. And the deep green is the colour that I chose with my M23 review, which I'll leave a link for that down in the description if you want to check that video out as well. And then up in the top left corner of the phone, you get your triple camera system, which consists of a 50 megapixel f1.8 primary camera, a 5 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide, and then a 2 megapixel depth sensor. So there's no macro mode on the M13, which is no big loss for me because I'm not a fan of macro cameras anyway. And unfortunately, the ultra wide is, like I said, just 5 megapixels. So you're not going to get huge amounts of detail in the photos, which is shown in the photos that I will show you in a second. And the video tops out at full HD at 30 FPS, like what it does on the front camera as well. And this is just standard budget quality video. Nothing to write home about, but it is fine if you're just taking a bit of video of the kids or something like that at home. And as for photos on the Galaxy M13, this is typical budget quality photos from other 50 megapixel cameras that I've tested before. There's a reasonable amount of detail and it does perform better than I expected when light does drop. It does bring in a decent amount of detail, but unfortunately colour isn't quite as poppy as what you'd find on other Samsung devices. Now, whether that's going to be an issue for you, I do quite like the sort of more saturated look that some other Samsung phones do bring out, and that doesn't seem to be present on the M13. And also Auto HDR doesn't do the best job at controlling brighter areas, like photos like this in my garden. The sky, or cloud should I say, aren't that defined. It's just a big white mess up in the top. But again, to be expected at this budget price point, you're not going to get perfect HDR results. And then on the ultra wide camera, Being 5 megapixels, there is a noticeable lack in detail, even in bright lighting. There's a lot of smudgy areas in the bottom of the photos with the grass, and foliage on the trees as well do come out a little bit messy. So unfortunately, the ultra wide is a very big disappointment on the M13, and I wouldn't even attempt to use it in low light as it's just a complete mess as well. And unfortunately, there is no night mode on the Galaxy M13 either, and that is, I think, a limitation on the processor that is found in the Galaxy M13. Now, moving on to said processor, inside you get the Samsung built Exynos 850 processor, which is built on an 8nm fabrication. If a lot of these specs do sound familiar, it is because this is basically the same phone as the Galaxy A13, which did use that same processor, same ultra wide, same 50 megapixel main camera, same 6.6 inch display. So this is basically a Galaxy A13 minus the macro camera on the back. So performance from the Exynos 850 is going to be very, very basic. Benchmarks of the 850 aren't very high at all, so you're not going to expect any great performance when it comes to severe multitasking and gaming or anything like that. But for average day-to-day use, the 850 seems to handle things relatively well. Apps open a little bit slower than what it does on other phones, but not to the point where I'm finding myself waiting around constantly for apps to open. It is relatively smooth, and this is backed up by 4GB of RAM and 64GB of base storage, but this of course can be expanded via a micro SD card. And if we quickly touch on the battery, you get a 5000 mAh battery packed inside the Galaxy M13 with a 15-watt charging. It is a little bit slow. It will take you over a couple of hours to get from 0 to 100%. But in terms of endurance, this 5000 mAh battery, along with the 60Hz display, the relatively low power consumption of the Exynos 850 inside, you're going to get some really great battery life. If you're a light user, 2 days, no problem. And as for software on the Galaxy M13, you get Samsung's One UI Core version 4.1 on top of Android 12. Aesthetically, it looks exactly like the One UI from the flagship Samsung phones like the S21s, S22s, etc. But One UI Core is just a slightly stripped back version of One UI with a few features missing that you do find on the flagships. But for the most part, the experience using the M13 is just like any other Samsung device. So that's my look at the Galaxy M13. And for the price of 99 quid, if you're lucky enough to snatch one up at that price, I think it's a really great phone. A nice full HD display with punchy colours, dependable performance if you're not an avid gamer or anything like that, and a reliable camera system in bright conditions, but of course lower light it does struggle a little bit, and battery life that will last you all day, no problems. For 99 quid, I definitely recommend it.